hope. That's what the mural said. And this town kind of needs it. It was probably painted there for a reason. I'll show you why in this video. Indiana is a state that has quite a few Rust Belt cities that dot the map, specifically in the central eastern portion of the state. Despite the qualified candidates, I could only pick one as being the right armpit of Indiana. My previous video was on the city that I determined to be the left armpit of Indiana, that being Terre Haute. But after thoroughly seeing and researching both towns, I actually feel like this city that will be featured in this video is much worse off than Terre Haute is. So, what is the city that I picked for being the right armpit of Indiana? It's Marion. Marion is your classic has-been town. The place was great in the past, but no longer is today. There used to be thousands of jobs 50 years ago, but today, you're lucky if you have a good one. Marion used to be a thriving community, but today, it's a dying community. Community pride used to be on display, but today, there's very little of it on display. Head through town and you'll get that old blue-collar feel, along with loads of abandoned buildings, unfortunately so. This is a town that has lost many factory jobs since the city was at its peak. As we go along with the video, you'll see just how rough things look in this town these days, and I'll talk about how Marion got to be this way. Well, let's get to it, shall we? To start the video, we're going to take the route into town from the interstate, as this is the way that most people from elsewhere would head into Marion. The first thing that you'll notice when taking exit 264 off of I-69 would be your typical interstate exit, which is a handful of gas stations, fast food chains, and a couple of hotels. Past that on the north side of the highway, however, you can see an abandoned car dealership, followed by a giant Dollar General distribution center, which happens to be one of the larger employers in all of Marion. Now, one of the first things that I learned in college from an old professor of mine was the importance of making a good first impression. There's a lot of truth to that advice because people don't forget first impressions. For example, if you sneeze on your hand and wipe your nose with it before you reach out to shake somebody else's hand while introducing yourself, yeah, that's disgusting, and people are going to remember that about you, so don't do that. Anyway, I say that to say this. Once I got to the main part of town, the first thing that I noticed about Marion when coming in from the east is this large vacant section of town on the north side of the street. The first thing that comes to my mind would be that maybe a flood was the final call for what used to be a couple of residential blocks with the Mississinawa River flowing right by. But opposite from that, well, it's what appears to be a salvage auction junkyard, right off the main entrance into downtown. A school bus for sale and a torn-up camper sold as is, and with some of these vehicles, parts only. Yeah, that's a pretty sight as you enter downtown, right?
Nope.
Absolutely not. Clean that up, Marion. Put that junkyard somewhere else in town, and maybe people would have a different first impression on your town. Just saying, tear up those empty streets on the north end of Highway 18. I see that there's a soccer field there. Maybe fill in the rest with trees, and you can make it a nature park out of it with a few looping trails, and people might have a different first impression of you, Marion, if you do that, Those are just some ideas. Just throwing that out there, that's all. That's just what I noticed, but you might have noticed something different, because there's also this James Dean sign as you enter town. Dean was born in Marion back in 1931. If you don't know who he is, well, James Dean was an actor who passed away at age 24 in a car crash back in 1955, but he was the star of a hit movie, Rebel Without a Cause, which was released the same year that he died. James Dean was an up-and-coming actor at the time of his passing. However, the people who work for the city of Marion to this day do their best to carry on his legacy by reminding you that Marion is the hometown for James Dean. We're going to come back to downtown and see it later in the video. For now, we're going to head south on Washington Street from downtown and check out some of the conditions of the central part of the city. There really is a large portion of this town that looks beat up, unfortunately so, and I won't be able to show all of it to you in this video, so if you're interested in seeing more of what Marion, Indiana looks like, both good and bad, Once you're done watching this video, make sure to watch my second video on Marion, where I'll show you all of the footage that I filmed but didn't use in this video. That video will be linked down below once it's uploaded, and it will be on my second channel called Chris Harden's Travel Archive, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Well, let's take a look at the most up-to-date economic stats for both the city of Marion and Grant County, shall we? Marion saw a population boom in the early 20th century when it was actually one of the fastest growing cities in all of Indiana. The town saw its population peak at almost 40,000 in 1970. Easy come, easy go, though, as once the area's economy declined, it never rebounded, and the city is on a 5-decades-long streak of losing at least 4% of its population every census count. Now, when it comes to Grant County as a whole, the population saw similar but not exactly identical trends. Population spiked in the late 19th century for Grant County before staying stagnant for 3 decades. The county then saw decent growth until 1980, but since then, it's declined slowly but surely, hitting a population peak of nearly 84,000 back in 1970. But today, that number is down to 66,000. So that's a loss of 18,000 for the county as a whole, and a loss of 12,000 for the city of Marion since 1970. Now, if what I've explained to you hasn't said enough about the area's economy so far, these numbers that you're about to see should tell you everything that you need to know about the current state of the economy in Marion, Indiana these days. The median household income is $42,000 per year. Only 15% of adults 25 and older hold a bachelor's degree or higher, and that stat sticks out in particular as there's a large, successful private university in town. What that stat also says is that the people who go to school at Indiana Wesleyan are not people who grew up in the city of Marion. The student body at Indiana Wesleyan is made up of students who come from other parts of the state, country, and world. They will also either head right back to where they came from after getting their degree, or they move on to greener pastures elsewhere. Basically, graduating students from Indiana Wesleyan will live their future life anywhere but in Marion, Indiana. Next up is the median value of owner-occupied housing units, which is $79,000. That's among the lowest that I've seen in a town that I've made a video on, especially for a city or a town the size of Marion. The only ones that I can think of that are worse would be Flint and Detroit. Lastly, the poverty rate for Marion residents is 28%. That's right, 28%. So over a quarter of the town's residents lives in poverty. Looking at the data for Grant County as a whole, things are only slightly better in each category. So, that being said, Grant County is among the 10 poorest counties in all of Indiana. It's also home to some of the highest rates in the state for children who live in poverty. So yeah, not good. When it comes to the crime rates for Marion, they're actually not bad at all. The violent crime rate is 196 for every 100,000 residents based on the most recent data, with the property crime rates coming in slightly above the national average rate. So things are chill here in good old Marion from that standpoint. They haven't always been that way, though. For instance, the violent crime rate was as high as 600 for every 100,000 residents back in 2003. Of course, that was 20 years ago, but as recently as 2018, the violent crime rate was above average at 455 for every 100,000 residents. Seems like in this town, though, that as long as you don't go starting drama with the wrong person, you won't have to worry about being the victim of a crime. You might have to worry about your property values, though. We're starting to really see some of it now. Dilapidated home after dilapidated home, kind of ugly, kind of dreary, overall depressing, even under the bright sun on a clear day in the late spring, just late enough into the season where unkept yards will start to overgrow with tall grass and weeds. Yeah, Marion definitely isn't the prettiest of small cities in Indiana right now. Man, there is so much blight in this town. It's overwhelming, really. The city has even cleared out a good portion of the blight since 2016. The city's website has this map available for anyone who wants to see just how much blight the city has cleared out. Most of the homes are in the part of the city where we are right now, which is right in the center. Well, the city might have done a lot of work to clear out the blight over the recent years. They've done as much as they could do anyway, but as you can tell, there is still a really long way to go. While we look at some of this, I want you to remember one of the stats that I pointed out, which is the median value of owner-occupied housing units for the city of Marion. That number is $79,500. For example, that's a salary for many people who live in Carmel or Fishers. Now, I'm not trying to downtalk people who are going through a difficult time. I'm not trying to compare people who live here to people who live in Carmel, not trying to compare situations, not at all. I'm just trying to add further perspective to illustrate how bad the economy is in this town, because it's bad, and there's not really a perfect way to go about it. Another fact is that a price for a home in Marion, Indiana is about the same price of some of the new electric vehicles that we see out there. The median value for a home across all of Indiana is $183,000, so the median value for a home in Marion isn't even half the amount of a home for the state of Indiana, a state that is already pretty cheap, because the median value for a home in the country is $281,000, about $100,000 more than Indiana. So yeah, anyway, that being said, I'll come back to talk more about the place in a few minutes. As many as 10% of single-family homes within Marion city limits have been abandoned. That number will just continue to get higher until the city can bring in some real economic opportunity for young professionals. You know, make it a tough decision for Indiana Wesleyan graduates on whether or not they want to leave or stay in the city of Marion. Give good impressions to the people who come visit Marion for the first time, but maybe that's just a dream, because it seems like the town is a long way from being able to clean things up. We're now in a commercial area at Washington and 32nd Streets. It kind of seems like it's an old historic district, but I can't really find anything on the area. Most of the buildings here seem to be empty and falling apart. There used to be several large factories not far from this little commercial strip, but today there's only one large factory within walking distance, that being the Cafe Valley Bakery. Cafe Valley employs 560 currently in Marion. Cafe Valley is just a small part of the larger complex that was once known as the RCA plant. For a long time, picture tube parts for RCA television sets were made right here in Marion at this large factory. The plant began producing black and white picture tubes back in 1949, with a reported peak employment of 4,000 workers back in 1973. It was a big deal. Before Apple and Microsoft, RCA was known as one of the leading tech companies in America during the 1970s, right around the time that the Marion plant saw peak employment. In 1986, RCA merged with General Electric, and the headquarters for RCA moved from New Jersey to Indianapolis. Not long after, General Electric sold the rights to make RCA to a company called Thomson Consumer Electronics, which then became Thompson Multimedia. The headquarters were built in the Indianapolis suburb of Carmel. RCA even owned the naming rights to the Indianapolis Colts home stadium from 1994 until it was demolished in 2008. It was the old Hoosier Dome, so RCA had a huge presence in the state of Indiana, to say the least. There is even a large factory in Bloomington, which is quite a ways southwest of Indianapolis. Thompson Multimedia started to see financial troubles over time due to foreign competition and bad investments. Layoffs were implemented at the Marion plant throughout the years before eventually closing operations altogether in Marion in 2004. In 2010, the company rebranded to being called Technicolor SA. During the same year, plans were announced to leave Indianapolis altogether. Well, the company left Carmel and the Indianapolis area altogether by 2017. So that's all she wrote for RCA in the state of Indiana. Meanwhile, in modern times, there's another Indianapolis suburb-based company called Re-Element Technologies that announced plans to add several hundred employees after a $100 million renovation to the old RCA site. This announcement came in October of 2023. It might not provide as many as 4,000 jobs like RCA did back in the late 70s, but they're jobs nonetheless. So hopefully those plans continue to go through. Further north along Adams Street from the former RCA plant is just more of what we saw a moment ago along Washington Street. So for now, we're going to check out the downtown area and talk more about the history of Marion. Alright, so here we are now in downtown Marion, and to say that downtown Marion, Indiana is a shell of its former self is a huge understatement. More empty buildings than occupied ones, an outdated and unkept look to the streetscape. At first glance, it doesn't look like any investments have been made in downtown Marion to improve things in years, possibly decades. But despite the looks, apparently there has been some efforts recently to restore some older buildings, like this one here to the right. This is the building in 2013, and this is the building today, so that's something at least. While I drive around downtown and look at everything that there is to see here, let's talk about how Marion came to be. Grant County was created in 1831 from parts of the neighboring counties of Cass, Delaware, and Madison counties. The city of Marion was founded during the same year to be the county seat of Grant County. The name Grant comes from Captain Samuel and Moses Grant, who were both from Kentucky and died while battling Indians in 1789. The name of Marion comes from Revolutionary War General Francis Marion. The city of Marion was founded when David Branson and Martin Boots both donated 30 acres of their land to help form the city. Hence, the names of Boots Street and Branson Street that head north and south through the central parts of Marion. For the first half of the 19th century, Marion grew primarily as an agricultural trading center, with small farms nearby and the lumber industry, because at the time, most of Indiana was covered in a thick forest. It was 1887, however, when the Marion area started to see substantial population growth, because it was that decade when there was a discovery of a large natural gas deposit nearby. The gas boom benefited other nearby sizable cities such as Anderson and Kokomo. For a 15-year stretch, East Central Indiana led the nation in the production of natural gas. At the time, it was the largest deposit of natural gas that has ever been discovered. They even called the area of Marion, Kokomo, and Anderson the Gas Belt. If you're unfamiliar with the area, there's even a city named Gas City just south of Marion. So, no, Gas City wasn't named as such for being a spot along the interstate for truckers to stop there and let their gas go boom. Okay, well anyway, it only took 15 years for the natural gas resources to be completely depleted in the area, so it was a very short-lasting industry for East Central Indiana, but you could argue that the gas industry had a bigger impact than bringing in money from producing natural gas, and that would be the first wave of European settlers to the region. It created a strong pool of blue-collar workers, which encouraged other industries to thrive throughout the first half of the 20th century. After the gas boom was over, among the largest industries in Marion and throughout east central Indiana was the glass-making industry. The auto industry also crept into the area slowly but surely. In 1956, General Motors opened what is known today as the Marion Metal Center, which brought thousands of jobs with it. The 1950s also marked the fastest decade of growth that the city of Marion has ever seen, and probably ever will see going forward, as the city grew by over 7,000 people that decade, a growth rate as big as 25.8%. The addition of the General Motors plant in town is largely credited for that 1950s population gain. Today, the plant has 1,600 workers, which is a fraction of its peak employment. GM also has a large factory, however, in Kokomo, and a large assembly plant to the north in Fort Wayne, so the auto industry, specifically General Motors, still to this day has a huge presence in the economy for East Central Indiana. For those reasons, sometimes people will refer to Marion as Little Detroit. Over the years, the name of Little Detroit has been used to refer to other aspects of Marion, such as the unsufferable amount of blight that's seen throughout the community. Other than that, Marion doesn't really have too many nicknames, unlike with the left armpit of Indiana, Terre Haute, a city that seems to have hundreds of them. I think that has more to do with the name of Terre Haute being easier to just play around with than anything else, because Marion, in a lot of ways, is like a smaller and unfortunately more depressed-looking version of Terre Haute. I would also argue that Terre Haute has more history and culture to go off of than Marion does. Speaking of arts and culture, here is something. Not sure what, but it's something. So, that's all good and dandy. Not so good and dandy is a small part but often remembered part of Marion's past. One infamous story that is well documented in this town is what is known as the last lynching to take place in the northern United States. In 1930, 2 black men were lynched in Marion, those being Thomas Shipp and Abram Smith. They were held in the county jail on charges of killing a white man and for violating his girlfriend. Well, a mob of 5,000 white men then dragged the 2 black men outside, and that's how that happened. There was even a third black man that was being accused of the crimes with the other 2, that being James Cameron, but a woman spoke up to his defense before the white men could do anything to Cameron. Cameron ended up surviving the event, but was still forced to spend the next 4 years in prison. Cameron ended up serving as a civil rights activist for the rest of his life before passing away in 2006. Regardless, the state of Indiana ended up giving Cameron an official apology in 1993, with the U.S. Senate doing the same thing in 2005. James Cameron is considered to be a huge part of the civil rights movement throughout the 20th century. Marion also has a strong history of segregation, just like pretty much every blue-collar city does in this country. On the bright side, however, in the fall of 2023, Marion elected the first black mayor for the town, Ronald Morrell Jr., who won over 60% of the town's votes. He's also the first black Republican mayor in the state of Indiana. One of the first things that Morrell Jr. addressed when being elected into office was the importance of fixing up the city through a program what he calls Clean City 2.0, calling it 2.0 because the prior attempt at cleaning the city didn't really work. So this is his attempt, and he states the importance of making the city attractive for families to want to live in Marion. Kind of like what I've been saying throughout much of this video, so hopefully changes are in the future for this town. Meanwhile, here's a photo that seems to be pretty popular among Marion circles on the internet that I've found quite often when doing research for this town. This was taken back in 1958, and the photo is of the same street corner that we see up here to the left of Washington and 4th. Alright, so one comment that I get in a lot of videos that I make every now and then is,
"Where are all the people? Why are there no cars on the road? Why are there no pedestrians? What's going on?"
A lot of the times I get comments like that on videos that I filmed early in the morning, like at 6 a.m. during the summer on a Sunday or something, but this was filmed in the afternoon on a Friday, and the pandemic shutdowns were 3 years prior to me filming this video, so this is probably what you can expect to see on any given day and at any given time when cruising the streets throughout the central core of Marion, Indiana. But where are all the people, you ask? Well, they're all right here, off of the West Bypass. This is the town's chain retail thoroughfare, if you will. It's called Western Avenue, which carries State Route 9 and 15 through the town. Further north, the route bends left and it's called Baldwin Avenue, despite it being the same road. And because of the two names that are given to the same major road, locals will often refer to this main thoroughfare as the Bypass. On the southern end, you have the big box stores in Walmart, Meijer, Lowe's, and Big Lots. There's even a Kohl's, a Hobby Lobby, and a Texas Roadhouse. On the north end of town, you have the now closed 5 Points Mall, in which, by the way, you can find either a dying mall or a completely dead mall like the one that's here in Marion in every single city that's the size of Marion throughout the country nowadays. The only thriving malls that you can find anymore are in the larger metro areas. Fort Wayne has a few thriving indoor shopping malls still to this day, while Indianapolis has several more than Fort Wayne does. But outside of Marion's dead mall, on the north part of this bypass, there are several other amenities like an AMC 12, a few fitness gyms, and a few mid-tier restaurants, and probably the town's nicest grocery store, so that's all good and dandy. You can tell that there used to be a lot more along this main commercial drag in spots though, but regardless, it remains the most active part of town, and it's not even close. Downtown and the central parts of town all look like a ghost town compared to what you see on the bypass. If you truly want to see the full length of the bypass and all of the amenities off of it, once again I'll have a second video uploaded on my second channel called Chris Harden's Travel Archives, where I'll upload all of the footage that I filmed but didn't use in this video. Once that video is uploaded, it will be linked down below. For those of you who want to see more of the blighted areas in town, like where we are right now, there will be plenty of that too in my second video. I drove around Marion for an hour and a half or so on this day, so yes, there will be a lot of Marion to see in that second video. A nice water park here owned and operated by the city, so I guess that's a bright spot for an otherwise ugly part of town. Just further north on Adams, past the railroad overpass, there's a large concrete slab with a small half pipe for skateboarding, but as you'll see, it's not really much of a skate park. Looks like the car in front of us maybe tried to get some air off of the half pipe up there, but anyway, let's see what people from around the internet have to say about Marion. Keep in mind that a lot of comments that are made on places on internet forums are negative, so don't take them all that seriously, but once again, that's what makes them entertaining, right? So take it with a grain of salt. I always view some of it as being true and some of it just being silly. Alright, so here we go. Voices from the internet. We'll start things off with a well-thought-out, honest opinion from Chad917. Marion is a dump, but it's close to the interstate, so that will open up some options. Yeah, very well-thought-out opinion there from Chad917. Okay, well, now for an actual well-thought-out opinion, this one from MoreFarm7442. I grew up 12 miles west of Marion. It was a nice place back then. All of Grant County was a nice place in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Then came the 80s, jobs started to leave. Some guy who made a prediction on the economy back then ended up being right. MoreFarm7442 continues to say, you have kids? You'll want to find a good school system for them. That's not Marion. Look around in the nearby small towns such as Sweetser, Swayze, or Converse. Anywhere but Marion, Gas City, or even Blackford County. This post was from 4 months ago, so it's a pretty recent reply. Now, Raji with 3 eyes, don't know if that's Roman numerals for Raj the Third or if that's Raji 2002, but anyway, this person says that Marion is little Detroit. Stay away, violent crime is high. Yeah, not so true. We went over the crime stats earlier, and Marion has a violent crime rate below the state and national average, so all good there. But also says that there is no entertainment. I would agree with this person there. They continue on to complain about having only 2 steak restaurants. I say that's not a big deal. If it is, quit being lazy and learn how to make your own. Not that hard. Lastly, Raji 2002 says that code enforcement is nearly non-existent and many houses are very blighted. Yes, that is true. Many of the homes in Marion are very blighted. That is true. Also, once you move to Marion, I guess you're stuck here forever. Oh man, this person makes it sound like a nightmare. Well, lastly, the Urban Dictionary definition is pretty brief for Marion, Indiana. It says, place people should not go to if they have the choice. So there you have it. Voices from the internet. Yeah, nothing too crazy there. Not one of the better voices from the internet segments. Really, I just think that Marion flies under the radar because it's a smaller city than many of the other ones nearby. Anderson, for example, gets a lot more negative publicity than Marion does. That town is essentially just a bigger version of Marion. There's a lot of blight in that city too. Muncie nearby is also a bigger city than Marion, but it also has a negative reputation. If you've seen my Terre Haute video that I uploaded last week, Muncie is basically Terre Haute's twin, so that town gets a lot of negative light shined on it, just like Terre Haute does. Yeah, Marion is just kind of a town that's here, and people from around the state don't talk about this place much. I know because I lived in Indiana for a decade. Really, it's Terre Haute, Gary, Muncie, and now Indianapolis that takes up most of the conversations that people have over crummy cities in the Hoosier state, at least in my experience. So here I want to finish up my drive down Adams and show this last stretch of Adams that I drive on and show the blight off of it before moving on to talking about the high school. We're going to head back out towards the bypass and check out Marion High School in just a few seconds. So not far from the bypass is Marion High School, home of the Giants. Marion actually has an incredibly strong history with its basketball program, as the school has won 8 state high school basketball championships. That's tied with Muncie Central for having the most in the state. And if you know Indiana, you know that high school basketball is a big deal in Indiana. Like, it's a bigger deal than most other things in life. High school basketball in Indiana is comparable to high school football in Texas. Well, among the most notable alumni is former NBA star Zach Randolph. Randolph had a 19-year NBA career, was a 2-time NBA All-Star, made the All-NBA third team in 2011, and had his number 50 jersey retired by the Memphis Grizzlies. Well, now it's time to showcase Indiana Wesleyan University. This school is unquestionably the heart and soul of Marion these days. It's really the only thing anymore that shines a bright light on the economic outlook for a town that really needs some good things going for it badly. Indiana Wesleyan was founded back in 1920, originally as Marion College. From the start, however, the school was always associated with the Wesleyan Methodist denomination. Marion College was just the 4th school in the country to be associated with the Wesleyan Methodist Church. However, the school didn't change its name from Marion College into Indiana Wesleyan University until 1988. Today, the Marion campus enrolls just over 2,200 students. Additionally, the school has 11 different satellite campuses, or regional education centers, across 3 states, which gives Indiana Wesleyan a total of 10,000 students throughout its program. Among the most notable alumni is author Laurel K. Hamilton. I can't emphasize enough just how important Indiana Wesleyan is to the city of Marion. Like, if Indiana Wesleyan decides to up and leave and maybe relocate their main campus to Kokomo or an Indianapolis suburb or Fort Wayne, yeah, if that happens, Marion might have just lost all hope. Not even kidding. But I am kidding because that's probably not going to happen, so no need to worry. The money that the school provides to the community is vital, though. Indiana Wesleyan is also the top employer in Grant County. Following the school and jobs provided to the local economy is General Motors in 2nd place, Marion Health in 3rd place, American Woodmark Corporation in Gas City in 4th place, and Walmart Distribution Center, also in Gas City, in 5th place. Walmart is actually on the list twice for Grant County, one for the distribution center and another for the Walmart store in Marion. Dollar General takes up another spot. So that, along with everything else that I've shown you in this video, tells you everything that you need to know about the economy in Marion, Indiana. Alright, well, it is now that time. What did we learn in this video? We learned that you can't always trust companies like RCA to stay in town, and you can't always trust that you'll have great opportunities if you end up staying in your hometown, but you can always trust Chris's livability score. When it comes to the education, unfortunately, Marion High School is ranked towards the bottom of the list for Indiana high schools. That's what happens when a city loses its tax base, though. You once had thousands of industrial jobs available in town. GM used to provide thousands of more jobs than they do today. RCA had 4,000 jobs in Marion, Indiana at its peak. There are a few other brownfield sites throughout Marion that I didn't even get to show you in this video, where there used to be even more factories, so that's an even bigger reminder as to how many factory jobs used to be in this town. It's also another reason to watch my second video on Marion, Indiana once it gets uploaded on my second channel. Anyway, all of those industrial jobs, once they left, that was also a huge tax revenue loss for the city. So the city has not been able to properly fund the schools like maybe they once were able to years ago. Anyway, 62% of students at Marion High School are considered to be economically disadvantaged. It's sad, only 13% are proficient in math, 48% in reading, and 11% in science, all of which are well below the state average. Education gets a 7 out of 20. Crime is next, and that's not as big of an issue in this town as some people might lead you to believe. Crime gets a 14 out of 20. Downtown to me appeared lethargic and lacking in life for a city of the size of Marion, although it seems as if there has started to be some investments to the buildings surrounding the downtown square. Hopefully more investments are made to buildings in downtown over time, but for now, downtown Marion gets a 6 out of 20. The economy is next, and what can I say? The local economy blows. You're lucky if you can get a job here. Hopefully that can improve over time as well, but the economy, for now, gets a 4 out of 20. Recreational opportunities in Marion are far and few in between. Please don't head down to the comments either and say that I'm not giving your water park off of Adams Street enough credit. There's a pedestrian trail that follows the river from downtown to a park on the north side, and maybe you can canoe or kayak the Mississinawa during the season if you really wanted to. There's also a larger reservoir along the Mississinawa northwest of town, and there's an okay hiking area 15 minutes southeast from downtown Marion. Other than that, there's not much of anything, as Marion is smack dab in the middle of flat Indiana farmland. Oh wait, did I forget the 62-mile-long Cardinal Greenway pedestrian bike trail that goes from Marion all the way to Richmond? My bad. It actually is kind of cool though, but how often are you going to use that? Be honest. Recreation in Marion, Indiana gets a 3 out of 20. The history of the town is interesting, although maybe not quite as interesting as some other small cities of the same size spread throughout Indiana. The oil and gas boom is probably the most notable event in the town's history. I guess you could throw in the fact that both James Dean and the man who created Garfield, Jim Davis, were both born in Marion. History gets a 10 out of 20. When it comes to amenities, there's plenty of them in town, as long as you're on the bypass, that is. Get away from the bypass and you won't find anything better than a Dollar General and discount smoke shops. There's a few restaurants and shops in downtown, but I would have liked to have seen more. There also isn't that much along the bypass beyond your most basic needs. Anyway, I'm giving Marion a 10 out of 20 on amenities. Last up is cost of living, and that's easy, 20 out of 20. Look on Zillow and there are move-in ready homes on the market for less than $100K all over the place here. It's incredible. But there's a reason why it's so cheap to live here. All in all, the Chris Livability score for Marion, Indiana is 74 out of 160, placing it towards the bottom of the list out of all of the cities that I've done this for so far. Final thoughts here is, I really think you should watch my second video on Marion, Indiana if you've been interested in what you've seen so far of this city. That's if you haven't heard me say that the first 5 times. The link will be down below once it's uploaded. I also think that the current mayor of Marion, Indiana, Ronald Morrell Jr., has the appropriate mindset to be able to turn things around. It all starts by acknowledging who you are as a city right now. And right now, in Marion, Indiana, you can't say that things are going well in Marion with a straight face. I mean, just look around. You can't say it. You're kidding yourself if you think things are fine here. But yeah, if you're among the city leadership and you can acknowledge that this needs to change, the visual appearance of your city, yeah, you're off to a great start, because not everybody who works for a city office, regardless of position, is passionate about their community, and it seems as if Marion's new mayor is passionate about his community. So maybe people will watch this video in 10 years and think that I'm an idiot for being so harsh on Marion, or maybe things will still be the same way. Only the future will tell. If things are still the same way, by the way, in 10 years, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the fault of the current mayor, because the disaster that we see here today in Marion, Indiana has been a long time in the making, so if it is going to turn around, it's going to take a long time. With that said, I do end the video here. And if you enjoyed this video, do me a favor and make sure to drop a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, as doing all of those things helps these videos destroy the evil monster that is the YouTube algorithm. Also make sure to hit that notification bell so that you can be notified every time that I upload a new video. If you enjoyed this video, then you might enjoy checking out some of the featured playlists on this channel. Videos with amazing insights on other places like what you saw here can be found in my Indiana playlist, my USA Small Cities playlist, or in my Armpit Cities playlist. Last but not least, if you can't get enough of me on here, you can always go follow me on my other social media accounts, and those links are below. We'll see you next time. Peace.